Hi, Dan. How are you?
Hey, Rachel, it's great to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too.
Yeah, I thought we had a really good session this month, but as I know is usually the case, there's way too many questions and way too long answers, so not really ever enough time, huh?
Exactly. Yeah, we had so many questions this month. So happy to get to a few more.
Excellent.
So the first one is the internal conflict in Israel really political, or is it a religious conflict between secular and Orthodox religious Jews?
Well, it's such a good question. And the real answer is it's both. There is a very significant religious and cultural divide that's emerged in Israel over the years, but not surprisingly, as is the case in any democracy, theirs or ours or any other, those cultural splits very quickly manifest themselves into very highly charged political debates. There's a saying in this country, they say that culture eats politics for breakfast. And I think that's exactly what's happening here, because what we're seeing is number one, a very significant increase in the number of Orthodox and other very religious Jews who have priorities of their own for themselves and their communities. And as that community grows, they've gained considerable political clout. And similarly, as population in the West Bank settlements has grown, that's created a real cultural divide between those settlers, whether in the West Bank or in East Jerusalem or elsewhere, with Israeli citizens, particularly Israeli Jews, in other parts of the country. And the Likud coalition, which elected Netanyahu as prime minister again a few months ago, has become increasingly reliant on those two communities. And it's very, very deeply divided Israeli politics. So short answer is both. And at least for the foreseeable future, it doesn't look like there'll be a political solution to be found until there's a cultural and social and religious compromise that can be identified.
Staying on Israel for a moment, to what degree are Netanyahu's legal issues driving the overhaul of the Israeli courts?
Well, even though Netanyahu's various legal challenges have been largely overshadowed in recent months, my own personal opinion, Rachel, is that this is at the core of the political debate. Let's think about it this way. Netanyahu, of course, very badly wants to remain in office. And many of his traditional center-right coalition allies, those who supported him in his previous years as prime minister, don't believe that he should be exempt or protected from the other nation's legal system. And so what that's forced Netanyahu to do is to reach out to an even more conservative and even more religious group of Knesset members who are willing to support him in his efforts to stay in office in exchange for him being willing to support them on this judicial overhaul and other policy and legislative priorities. So, like we talked about on the webinar earlier this month, Netanyahu has been in the public eye in Israel for decades. And regardless of what you think about judicial overhaul and a remake of the courts, and it's worth noting that both sides of the Israeli political spectrum have called for reform in the past. What I would say is it's never been a particular priority for Netanyahu, at least not visibly or vocally. And it seems logical to me that the reason he's embracing it and pushing it so hard now, even given the other political challenges it's created for him, is because he does need to keep those more conservative Knesset members on his side. And the best way, and perhaps the only way for him to do that right now, is to continue pushing for the court reforms.
And our final question, why was China selected as peace broker between Saudi Arabia and Iran? Does China think that by allying itself with the two nations, they would later support China's claim to Taiwan?
I think there's all sorts of reasons that China decided to inject themselves in the Middle East after keeping the region at arm's length for many, many years. More broadly, China's decided, not just in the Middle East, but elsewhere in the world, that being seen as a global power on par or perhaps greater than the United States is in their best interests, not just for Taiwan, but their other geopolitical goals. And just like the Chinese have attempted to broker some type of peace between Ukraine and Russia, involving themselves in the Saudi Arabia-Iranian disputes helps them not just among those two countries, but elevates their stature in the world. And so again, in answer to the question, their goals for Taiwan are a small part of that overall equation. But this is China essentially attempting to tell the world, particularly the Southern Hemisphere, they're saying, we're not just an economic power, we're not just a growing military power, but we're also a growing diplomatic power, and you need to take us seriously on that front too.
Well, thank you so much, Dan. I'm really looking forward to next month's program.
I am too, Rachel. I know we're going to be shifting to domestic politics. Lots to talk about as the presidential campaign heats up, and hopefully that'll be a really interesting conversation.
Definitely, I'm sure it will be. I'll see you then.
I look forward to it, Rachel. Thanks so much.
Thanks.